All right, welcome to another Sub CLE. Today it's pretty cool. Got an author on the show today, and he writes historical Cleveland stuff. I'm going to have you introduce yourself because I can't say your last name.
Oh, yeah, not a problem, Vince. My name is William G Krejci.
Krejci.
Yeah.
That's like a Polish thing?
Close, very close. It's Czech Republic now, but like when my family came here in the 1870s, 80s, it was Bohemia. So, yes, my dad, he'll say, no, it's Bohemian. It just means Taylor.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Taylor. Oh, really?
Taylor, yeah. It means Taylor, like Schneider in German. Yeah, I know. It's Krejci, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say Taylor then.
No, don't do that. Krejci's fine. Bill, just Bill. Bill's good. Yeah, Bill to my friends.
No. So I was really looking forward to this. We're starting a little late. I'm not gonna say why.
I'll go ahead and say why. I'll go on.
No, he had to watch a movie.
I spaced it. I'm like, oh damn it! I even put it on the calendar, and I just went and watched Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which was good.
It was a good movie. I did like that one. So hey, it's all good.
Jerker.
But no, like I was excited about this because I met you over at the bar. And you lived in a pretty interesting place for a little while. I just
6 years. Yeah.
Can you go ahead and explain that?
I spent 6 years living as the resident historian at Cleveland's famous Franklin Castle. That's
cool.
People are like, oh, it's so creepy. I'm like, yeah, I call it home. I did for 6 years. I moved in 2016, and I moved out at the beginning of December of 2022. Okay. So yeah, but just over 6 years. So
wow. No.
Yeah,
so how was that? Did you notice any stuff? I mean, come on, because I don't believe this stuff.
Okay. All right. So here's what it was. So first I'll say how it happened. I met the owners on one occasion. They were doing some digging in the backyard, and they were digging, and they hit a wall. In the dig, literally hit a wall. There was a buried wall in the backyard. They didn't know what it was, so they reached out to a guy who reached out to me. They had me come in and looking at where it was. It was the foundation of the first house that used to sit there. Built about 18.
You do like
property research, but I also do history research, and I had been researching the Franklin Castle since 1992. Okay, and this was 2015. Okay, was when this happened. So they found out that I was writing a book about the house with a friend of mine named John, that I'd been researching it for many years, and they invited me to take up residency, which the following year I did.
Okay. So and they own the house.
And they own they own the house. That's it's owned by an LLC called O'Dear Productions. Okay. And it was the head of O'Dear who invited me to take up residency.
And what does that mean, take up residency? Rent it out?
Rented. Yeah. So I was offered an apartment on what they call the second, but it's technically the third floor of the house. If you go 1, 2, 3, 4, it was in the back half of the third floor. So yeah, I paid rent. And was also there to help, like if we had visitors come over to explain the history of the house, share that with them. Private groups would come by once in a while. Friends of the owner, people that would reach out to us. So it was good to have somebody that was knowledgeable. But it was also great because while I was living there, John and I finished the book.
Yeah,
writing it, doing all the edits, and on the second floor there's a glassed-in room.
Okay.
Trimmed out in redwood, and it's original to the house, and it was the guy who built the house, Hannes Tiedemann. It was his personal home office. So that's where I threw my desk, and that's where John and I sat. We did the final edits for the book on the castle, the castle. It was very surreal in this office, writing this book about this man and his house. And
that's cool. So because it's funny because I was shopping at Giant Eagle and I saw the book, and I was like, oh wait, I talked to that guy, and he's coming. I know that guy, you know.
He's one of the it's wild.
Yeah, and how do you do how do you do the research on something?
Well, that one we started. That started in 1992 as a high school project. I'm giving away kind of my age by saying that I was in school in '92. Yeah.
And would you study journalism?
Yeah, but in this case, it was a speech writing class. We had to find some historic event or something like that to write about. I'm trying to even remember. It was like 33 years ago. So
right.
Like, oh, okay, or 31 years ago, and I'm like, oh, so obviously it wasn't my math wasn't my strongest suit, still isn't. But yeah, it was something like that. And I started doing a little bit of research, took some Polaroids of the castle and the
Yeah.
burial site where the family that built it, where they're all laid to rest, and started looking at some of the legends that had been written about in newspapers and in at that time just one book, Haunted Heartland, and started kind of pulling them apart a little bit and finding
Right.
out what's true and what isn't.
Yeah.
And then from there, saying, okay, well, this isn't true. Well, the story had to come from somewhere.
Right.
So start researching that. Ultimately, this led me to meeting John Myers, who co-authored the book with me.
Okay.
And from there, we
But, so he was doing his own.
he was
independent
doing
kind of
he
research?
was So I ran into him. It was funny. I had just taken the haunted Cleveland tour.
Okay.
With Chuck Gove and Beth Richards, and that's how I met them. They're wonderful
Okay.
people, and it's an amazing tour. And the Franklin Castle was one of the stops, and this is in 2005. So I got to speaking with them. I said, "Well, I've done a little bit of research on this," and they said, "Well, hey, would you be willing to share some of your stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah, let me go back though, and I want to look into a few more things."
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
started doing that, and it took me to the Western Reserve Historical Society
Okay.
to their library, and they said, "Well, we don't really have much. We have one newspaper article in our file. Would you mind doing something, giving us something that we can put here?" I said,
Oh, that's
sure.
cool.
So then it took
That's
me to
cool.
the county archives office, which at the time used to be on Franklin.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I met John Myers, who was working on the same project independently. He was also researching the castle. We decided to pool our resources
So you
and
guys
write
are
a
like
book.
doing like
Yeah.
guerrilla kind of research.
Yeah.
kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
journalism
We
kind of
ended
stuff.
up we ended up interviewing people that lived there,
Really?
and where they were not around, like their children or grandchildren, including the Romano family. We were able to track them down. They're wonderful, wonderful
Yeah.
people. I interviewed a fellow named Rod Cradaville, who he and his wife, they briefly owned it in the late 70s. And it was just a few weeks later, Rod passed away. So I
Okay.
spoke to him right before he passed. So I did get a little bit from him
Okay.
on that. Met Helen Merceda, a fantastic, wonderful, amazing woman. A fountain of knowledge because her and her husband George also owned the house in the early 80s.
So I
It was
actually
great.
I was just thinking about this. Like anybody that's like listening to this, you know, the tens of people.
Tons and tons.
I, as I'm sitting here listening, I'm like, when was the Franklin Castle built? What's going on? What's the history? What is
A little
going
bit
on
of the
with Franklin
backstory. So the house was built 1881 to 1883.
Castle? We'll go back to that.
It has the reputation for stuff of being the most haunted house in Ohio,
Right.
and that's in Ohio.
I've seen things where it was like the most haunted place in the world.
One of the it's made some lists have put it as one of the in the top. Someone I want to say was like MSNBC or something like that. Back in the early 2000s, put out a list of the 10 most haunted houses in the United States, and that came in at like number 5 or number 6. And I've seen other lists that put it like in the top 10 worldwide. And it gets like mentions on occasional TV shows.
Well, and I've even seen like
American Horror Stories had a mention of it. So
yeah, I've even seen like because some ex roommate of mine collects like those like you know, you buy them off a TV, like the collector's edition ceramic kind of, you know, sculptured thing, you know, and it was like the Amityville,
the Bradford Exchange. I saw that,
and it was like one of 4. You know, it was like the Amityville house. It was like
that I think
something
they
else.
did, and that was the second one they did was the Franklin Castle, which hats off to Bradford Exchange for even doing that, but it only looks kind of like Franklin Castle.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
I think what they did was they took an old photo from sometime after 1953 when it got hit by a tornado to 2001 when the house there was a lot of work done on it between 1999 and 2000, so it was probably sometime before that, where they put the peak back on the tower, which got knocked off in a tornado. In the little model, the little ceramic housing, it has a flat top on the tower, and it looks like kind of like the house from only one angle. They put balconies and doors where there are no balconies, and so nobody actually came out and like walked around the house and
they kind of saw a picture of the front of it and probably
just went out, gave it to somebody and said, "Here, make one of these." Where's the rest of it?
That's
use your imagination.
So speaking of imagination, because that's what I think this is.
Okay.
Why is it haunted? Like, why does it get that reputation?
So I grew up hearing the stories about cold spots, voices echoing from empty rooms,
but like
doors
family
open
members
slams.
that lived there.
Well, the story is not the original story that we were all told. Most of it is not true.
Okay.
Says it was built by a fellow named Hannes Tiedemann, a German immigrant who became a banker. That's true.
And there's a street named after.
That's his brother. It's named after.
Okay.
Eldest brother Klaus.
See, that's why you're going to come out more often. I need this Cleveland history.
And the Klaus Tiedemann house is still standing over there. It's that old Italianate house on the east side of the road, about halfway down.
Okay.
So, and then he had another brother named Ludwig who has a street in Defiance, Ohio, Tiedemann Avenue, named after him.
Okay.
So anyway, Hannes Tiedemann, the story says that his daughter passed away suddenly in the castle in 1881 at age 15. It is true that he had a daughter named Emma that passed away, but not in the castle. The castle wasn't built yet. She died in the first house that was there.
Oh, I see.
And then was buried at Riverside Cemetery. A few months later, his mother passed away. Some stories say at the castle. No, she died at her daughter's house over on West 48th Street.
Yeah.
Not the castle. And again, it wasn't built yet.
Yeah.
Then stories say that in 1883, 3 more children all died mysteriously on the same day. That's not true either.
Okay.
They died between 1863 and 1873. And what happened was in 1883, he had them moved from their original burial site at Monroe Street Cemetery to the family plot at Riverside.
Oh, I see.
And that's why people who do the research go there and say, "Oh my God, look, 3 children all died on the same day."
Yeah.
And then the story says that Mr. Tiedemann's wife, Louise, passed away in the house in 1895. And that is true. She is the first person to actually die in the castle.
Right.
Who's been left out of the story was about 8 years later, the youngest son of the second owner, a boy named Albert Mulhauser, passed away. He was 10. Died, I believe he was 10. He's buried back in Alexandria, though, beside his father, and then later his mother.
Okay.
And then 2 caretakers for the German Singing Society that had the place pass away. So as far as we know, the house only had 4 deaths.
Okay.
But so as far as the legend goes, all these weird deaths in the house. And then some stories say that Tiedemann murdered a servant girl and a niece. Those people never existed.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's just strictly legend that somebody made up.
I mean, could it be he's hiding it because he had money?
No, that's the story. That's what they say. In fact, I kind of got into this with Zach Baggins when he was out filming that episode of Ghost Adventures at the house.
Okay.
I was trying to explain to him Hannes Tiedemann didn't kill anybody.
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, you weren't there, so you can't say." And I'm like, "No, the guy never." I'm like, "I'm also friends with his descendants." No, the guy didn't kill anybody because the servant girl and the niece, they never existed. They were conjured. They were made up by a woman who was a self-proclaimed medium who was living in the house in the early 1980s.
Right.
She's the one that came up with those names, Karen and Rachel, and made up the story because she was giving tours.
Right.
And she just started making up stuff about the house.
Yeah.
These people never existed. So no, Tiedemann never. It makes for a great story, but it's not true. But as far as when I moved in, I was a bit of a skeptic.
Yeah.
I was actually a very huge skeptic. I often joke around about like, okay, you've seen those TV shows that have like the paranormal based TV shows, like okay, like what do you call the person with the camera?
I don't know.
That's the cameraman. Okay.
Oh, right.
What do you call the person holding the microphone and the recording equipment? That would be the audio tech.
Okay.
The person who's in front of the camera.
Yeah.
That's the host.
Okay.
The person that's full of shit.
Yeah.
That's the medium. And I've burned a lot of bridges by saying that.
Yeah.
I only say that. I know some people do have gifts that I'll never understand. So I just say that as a joke. I'm not serious. But just to give you an idea of how big of a skeptic I was when I moved in.
Yeah.
I personally have never seen a ghost. I mean, I've seen things, but I can't say I've never seen like a floating person walk past, I've
Right.
never seen that. I've seen things at the house that I can never explain, and I never
Mm-hmm.
know I never will be able to.
Mm.
I know that for a fact. And I've had things happen to me, and I never like to deal in absolutes.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, that the one person that lived in the castle that made up the story of Rachel and Karen,
Yeah.
that she was a self-proclaimed. She claimed that she was a medium.
Right.
She also claimed to be Little Miss Sunbeam from the Sunbeam bread packages. She
Yeah.
said that was her too. Um, but I never said she was a medium because
Right.
I never deal in absolutes. So when people like ask me, well, is two questions that they ask me, the two most common questions. One, how do you pronounce your last name?
Right.
Two, is the Franklin Castle really haunted?
Yeah.
And I used to say, well, I don't know. Define a haunting. What do you think a haunting is? And do you think this is
Yeah.
that? Now, when people ask me, is the Franklin Castle haunted? I say, yes, it is. And I just very point
Well.
blank will look at him and say, yes, it is. It is haunted. I have enough. I've had enough things happen to me in that house to tell me there is something there that I will never
Oh.
understand. And if it falls into what people call a haunting, if it's things moving around on their own, or lights turning on and off, or doors opening and slamming, voices echoing from empty rooms, the house shaking when there's no truck going by,
Mm-hmm.
cold spots,
Mm.
cold rooms, seeing what looks like a ghostly face on the glass of your clock, on your mantel clock on top of the TV cabinet,
Mm-hmm.
footsteps running up and down the stairs,
Yeah.
and a little child giggling. If that's what constitutes and makes a house haunted,
Yeah.
yeah, it's haunted.
Yeah.
Because those are all things that I did see. Also, I guess you call it an orb. Now, those, they show up on film or on video. No, Christmas Eve, my first year there, I was with my brother's family, and my niece asked me if I'd ever seen a ghost, and I turned around and said, "No, I've never seen it." And as I'm saying, I've never seen a ghost. I see a ball of light, very small, move, and it's looking down a corridor, which is now a bathroom, and it's walled off. And I just see this light come out of the wall near the ceiling, drift across, and then vanish into the next wall. And I shut up at that point, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I have no idea what it was. I have no idea.
So,
The likes of which I'd never seen before or since. So,
so are you
um,
open to the fact that there's something not paranormal about it? That it could be something.
of course,
Yeah.
there is, but if people, what people will define, what I define as a haunting, yeah, I'd say it's haunted. There might be something beyond what we can explain that maybe, who knows, maybe in a few hundred years or a couple thousand years, somebody will have an explanation
Well,
for.
yeah, I was kind of thinking
Um,
about it. I don't know. I might be. I have no experience in this, but I've never seen a ghost, never heard
mhm,
one, never did
mm.
anything like that. But I'm thinking like, I do believe there is like a common consciousness, um, throughout everything, and it's like I think if you get enough people to believe something, then maybe that there can be some kind of aberrational kind
Something
of thing.
materializes
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you put enough energy into it.
Right, right.
That's a possibility.
you know.
That's a very, that's a good theory. I like that.
Yeah. And I was just wondering, is that something you thought? I mean, is that something that like what are some of the other kind of
Somebody else put forth a theory once, and it was at a convention that I went to, and it was closely connected with the idea that okay, like mothers have an intuition,
hmm
and that's true. Mother does have an intuition. Mine especially. I won't get into that story, but he gave an example of a story of a haunted house where nobody can live beyond, it's like May 12th or something like that. Just throwing a date out there,
Yeah.
because people always see the ghostly soldier running down the stairs, and that's it. They scares them
Yeah.
off and they leave. So it's in this theory. It was the day that the guy died that the mother was at home, and the mother had this intuition of her son passing away or running down the stairs on the day that he went to go enlist and running out the door, but she saw that on the day that he died.
Yeah.
And it replays itself over and over again. And it's not so much a physical manifestation of the person's spirit as much as it is an impression of what the mother left behind on the house. So I'm like, that's an interesting theory also.
Yeah.
The possibilities are endless. I mean, somebody might one day have an explanation for what all of it is. Again, I don't really like to deal in absolutes, and I still am something of a skeptic. What really, really, really attracts me, though, is more than any of it, is when you can find a story that's been forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right.
Forgotten or a lost story. Or some key part of the story that has just been overlooked. When researching the story of the Franklin Castle, Hannes Tiedemann, the poor man, he had his name dragged through the mud. He's been accused of murdering people that never even existed.
While he was alive?
No. Okay. 50, 60 years after his death. So the guy wasn't even around to defend himself by some self-proclaimed medium. You know,
his name is getting.
So for years he was known as, he murdered a servant girl and a niece named Karen and made it look like suicides. And that's so. I kind of made at least for my own part, I made it my own mission. Tell the person's story. Tell it properly. Tell it honestly.
Yeah,
it's why if you read the book, exactly, and that's if you read the book about the castle, you're gonna get to the hauntings eventually. Okay, I go over John and I we went over the original legend first.
Yeah.
And then we say hardly a word of it's true is what we say. Right. So now, since most of the legend is based around this Hannes Tiedemann figure, how he was this monster of a human being, is just this terrible person, and that's the big part of the legend. We start with the site of the history of the site, the people that built the first house, and who Tiedemann really was, and his whole life is explored. His family, the people around him, the things, the construction of the castle, what it originally looked like. The first half of the book is spent looking at the Tiedemann family and the construction of the castle. Then we go in the second half into the later owners, and then around the 1960s when the ghost stories started to emerge. And what a wild ride that house has been on. I mean,
so I'm just curious, like, why do you? I mean, is it just the way it looks? Maybe.
No, it's a lot of people are drawn to the way it looks. It's very weird. There are even two children's faces carved on either side of the door in sandstone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, flanking the lintel.
It's creepy.
Yeah, they got like acanthus leaves behind them. They're people are like, they're gargoyles, or no, or they're chirps. No, they're not. They don't have wings and they're not downspouts. They're grotesques.
Yeah,
that's what they call them. But they're just children's faces, very playful. It's this high Victorian eclectic architecture of the house. It's a very unusual looking house, of course, very pretty. But some people like my first impression was when I'm 5 years old and we're in my whole family, we're driving home from my grandparents' house, and we're taking the scenic route they lived over on 41st in Newark, just south of Clark Avenue. We lived in Avon Lake, so we're going to go take Lake Road. So we go north on 41st and we get up to Franklin, and right there across the intersection is the Franklin Castle.
Yeah.
And it was before it was cleaned. It was a very dark, black and sooty, very spooky looking house.
Was it vacant for a while?
No. At the time, it was owned at that time.
Okay.
And I remember my dad saying, "Hey kids, look, that's a real haunted house." And my jaw just about hit the floor of the van. I'm like, "That's like Casper?" And he's like, "No, but real." And I'm like, my dad had never said anything as profound as that.
Right.
So I'm like, well, it must be true then. I thought the ghosts were just like cartoons and stuff, and no, they're real. And so then I had a million questions for the old man that, he of course wasn't able to answer. But anytime like PM Magazine did a special on like around Halloween on like they showed like the Franklin Castle, he made sure that, I was able to watch it. And it was just things like that. Or if there was a newspaper article on it, he'd read it to me because I was 5,
Yeah.
So I was just hooked at that point. So for my own part, that's why I was
sure. And
drawn to
then
it.
and then when you were given an opportunity to do some research on a speech or something, then
Yeah.
you were like, hey, I know exactly the thing, It's just, yeah, because you were saying, okay, so, well, let's go back to, I mean, there's so many different places you can go with this. I mean, because is that where, so you said in the 60s the stories started.
Yeah. Well,
So,
50s, they were kind of circulating by the
Yeah.
50s, but they really went public when the Romano family moved in
Okay.
1967. They began to notice almost immediately, pretty much from day one, that there was something going on in that house.
yeah,
The story that had been circulating for a number of years was Jimmy and Dee Dee. They were twins, the owner's kids, and they were quite young at the time. The story says that they came down on that first day. They were playing upstairs, and they asked their mother if they could have a cookie for their friend, the little girl upstairs who was crying. And of course, her mom thinks that one of the neighbor kids is in the house or something.
Right.
Goes up, and there's nobody there, of course.
Mm.
Now, I asked Jim and his sister Dee about this, and they said, yeah, that story is true.
Really?
Of course, they're not little kids. They're all grown up now. But
Right.
they said it happened more than just that one time. It happened on quite a few occasions. And they said it was like having an imaginary friend, but she wasn't imaginary. They said as they got older, they realized that seeing her wasn't normal, and they started becoming afraid of her. And it was about that time that the girls stopped appearing to them. So that's where the Romano family first, and it was around that time also that it started making its way into the newspapers.
Okay, so
And
the
so
Romano,
that's when the rest of the world found out
right?
that the house was haunted.
Well, did the Romano family like actively seek out like newspapers? How did the
No,
story get out?
no. I don't even remember how it started. I think that somebody might have gone to the press about it, but I don't believe it was the
Yeah.
Romanos. I think it was a neighbor,
Okay.
and I believe at first the family was like, "Okay, sure, we'll talk about it. It's a big, beautiful house."
Yeah.
They originally had plans to turn it into a restaurant. They had previously operated a restaurant over on Lorraine Avenue,
Okay.
just south of there, and it was taken over by eminent domain so they could build a methadone clinic or something.
Yeah.
So they were actively looking at turning it into a restaurant, but they couldn't get the zoning for the parking. They said, no, you have to tear down the carriage house in the back, and if you're gonna, because we're not gonna have all these cars parked on the road, and so they refused to do that.
Right.
So the first
Was that original?
yeah, it was built in 1883.
Okay.
It was built
With the house?
Yeah, with the house. When they completed the castle, they completed the carriage
Okay.
house.
So yeah,
it's-
you wouldn't want to tear that down.
No, it's just as historic, and it's also quite beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I believe it. Yeah, at first they welcomed the media coverage. It was fine, tell a little bit about what they're doing, fixing up the house and doing
Yeah.
this big project. But then the papers kind of started making Mrs. Romano out to be a bit of a cuckoo, which she definitely was not.
Oh, right.
But they were kind of like rewording
Sure.
things
They knew
that
that
she had
story.
said.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that always gets me.
Yeah.
If I'm going to, and I've always done this. If I'm going to interview somebody for a book, before I go publishing that,
Yeah.
I'm going to send them the chapter and say, "Hey, can you take a look at this?
Right.
And do you
just
have
make
any
sure it's okay.
corrections in our interview? Because I don't want to take anything out of context.
Right.
I don't want to change. And the last thing I'm going to do is jump on one thing and over glorify
Well,
that, which is something that somebody did.
well,
to
that's
the
why you're
Romano
not on
family.
a major news network.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll see. People are like, "Oh, you're." I'm like, well, this is okay. Like, there's being a historian, and then there's being an investigative historian,
Right.
which is what I always
Well,
tell people, because I'm really. They're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And then I take that history and I apply it to writing books. My 9th one comes out in September, so
So, yeah, I mean, and that's cool. Like, I think the truth of history is way more interesting than, I mean, sure, you can have these crazy stories and whatnot, but I almost never believe the ghost story. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, it's a haunted house, sure, whatever. But if you say you see things or whatever, like I said, I can kind of buy into everybody if you get enough people to believe in one thing and focus on this one thing, maybe, that's why I said if you can get like every single person in the world to think that unicorns exist, like, and really believe it, then they will.
Almost like Dream of a Thousand Cats.
What is that? I don't know.
It's a Sandman comic. It was
yeah.
The idea was that cats used to be these giant creatures and humans were very small, and the cats used to have humans as servants, and then they would hunt them at night. Then like the humans dreamed, only 1,000 of them dreamed that it was the other way around.
Yeah.
And they woke up one morning and it wasn't like they suddenly were. It just always had been.
That's right.
So that's the idea. So you get enough people to believe in something, dream in something,
so I can kind of
becomes true.
Yeah, I can kind of buy into that maybe some kind of. Gosh, I don't know. I'm really stretching here, guys.
Yeah,
I'm really trying here.
Well,
I could, that maybe something, because there's, I've heard things and that were strange, and I'm sure there's a logical explanation for it. You know what I mean? Like
they're having done a lot of research on just not the castle, but other hauntings, mostly in Cuyahoga County. Some of them are so extraordinary.
Yeah.
But some of them can be easily explained away. It's a lot of times it sounds like the tenant who's renting the house just wants a discounted rate, or they want to get out of their lease, or something like that. So, okay, I'll share with you a story.
Okay.
This one comes from around 1912. And this will be in
Spanish flu, right?
Yeah, no, a little bit. It's about 5 years later.
Okay.
This is Cleveland Avenue, leading. It's on what was then called Leading Road. It's now Leading Avenue, and the house in question, if anybody listening here lives on Leading Avenue, the house is not there anymore.
Okay.
The house is gone. They tore it down to build the on-ramp from Fulton onto I-71 South.
Okay.
So that's where the house was. And this will be in my new book that comes out in September, Lost Ghost Stories of Cleveland. This story has never been shared with anybody, so your listeners are going to get a preview of a story that has not been shared.
Exclusive.
That's the criteria to be in this book. Is it has to be Cuyahoga County, it has to be over 100 years old, and it cannot have been written about or talked about on a radio show, no magazines, no newspapers, no books, no websites, nothing at all.
So this book you're writing is going to be all just original stories.
These are all new stories that I found, over 30 of them.
Right.
That will blow your bleeping minds. So, in this case,
I know like a bunch of people that would be interested in that.
These are going to be all new to everybody.
That's cool.
The story with Leading Avenue. As I'm reading this, and this really it covered like a few weeks of newspaper coverage. Like it was like the lead story. This Leading Road ghost. Family that was living there were terrified out of their wits, so to the point that they actually had to have people come over to hold vigil upstairs in the ghost's favorite room and wait for something to happen. And afterwards, most wouldn't come back, and they definitely would not talk about it.
No.
What they had witnessed. It started with people coming over just curiously, and they wouldn't get beyond the front room with hearing that noise upstairs. The owners first witnessed it, this entity, if you will, for lack of a better, wraith or something, upstairs, said it was the head of a bear or a large dog or a wolf or something, with human-like intelligence in its eyes, but an inhuman smile on its face. And it was dragging a cloud of smoke behind it. It was just a head, claws, arms, and shoulders struggling to pull a cloud of smoke behind it. And it terrified the family. They ran out. The husband was at work. The wife grabbed the children and ran to a neighbor's house. And when the husband came home, they went over and the door was open. So they suspected it was gone, but it wasn't. It was still there. Everybody moved downstairs. There were about 8 people living in this house at the time because there was the couple, their children, two parents, the wife's parents, and a boarder, whose name I don't remember, a lady. But they ultimately moved all their bedrooms downstairs onto the first floor, and occasionally the thing would come downstairs, but mostly it stayed upstairs. The wife, her brother came over. He said, "Well, I'll figure it out." And he went to go spend the night upstairs. He wasn't up there, not even a half an hour. He came down, said there was a sickening smoke coming out of the floor, and then out of the smoke, he said, was this object tumbling end over end slowly at him, kind of like somebody had kicked a football at him. He said, "Not for $1 million." Interestingly, he was one of the people who came back, one of those men who went upstairs and held vigil that night, so he did do that. The husband, he was attacked while sleeping in his chair one evening. Christmas, the family was decorating their tree Christmas Eve, and one of the neighbor kids was over. And this is before it all went public. It didn't go public until around January. She turned over and she screamed. There was a dead boy standing on the stairs. She left as fast as she could. And it turns out that the family that occupied the house right before them lost an infant son, 2-year-old boy. They were interviewed, that family. And the mother of that family said, "Yes, the loss of my son was one of the worst things that happened. It was just one of a number of bad things that happened to me. When I was giving the baby a bath, I sent my other son upstairs to grab something. He came running down screaming, saying that there was some sort of a creature upstairs that had lunged out at him." She said, "I looked up the stairs, and there it was at the top of the stairs, and it was like the shoulders and head of a large bear." She was describing the same thing, a big black bear creature with the smoke behind it. Ultimately, after her son died, it was like a couple weeks later, they moved out. So then, after the second family, after they finally move out, the family that owned it, their last name was Nagy. They said, "Well, fine, we're going to live there ourselves, and we're going to put this whole thing to bed and figure out what's going on." So they loaded up a cart and the horse, and they rode over there, and they brought all their possessions over to move in. And when they stopped outside the house, the horse died. Dropped dead right there. Yeah. A few weeks later, they said that their cat, St. Anthony, went up and killed something, but they never did find a body. But they said, "That's it. No, the house isn't haunted anymore."
It's not?
Well, that's what they had said.
Right.
And that's around 1912. That's when all this happened. Now, like you said, there's got to be probably some logical explanation for it, but I think that there are some things that are just beyond us that we can't explain. And as I'm reading these newspaper articles that I'm finding that share these stories, and because I'm going through, I'm reading, I'm making damn certain that this hasn't been covered by any book. It wasn't picked up by a later newspaper article, because then it wouldn't fit the criteria. No websites. I'm checking everywhere, and it's not there. But as I'm reading these articles, I'm like, I'll be damned if this doesn't sound demonic.
Yeah.
The bad smell, the smoke, the creature, the way they describe this thing. It just blew my mind. I'm like, this is not. And there's one more story that in the book. I won't go into that one, but that is similar. Yeah, comes out September 18th. Yeah, there are a lot of great, like, people talk about Erie Street Cemetery downtown. Okay, they say that it's haunted by the ghost of Jocko Sot. He's a Sauk. His stone says Sauk chief. He wasn't old enough to have been chief. He was a Sauk warrior. He fought in the Black Hawk Wars. He died in Cleveland in 1844, and he's buried there. And his stone lies flat, and it's broken into a number of pieces, but it's still legible. And there's also a newer monument there for him as well. And Chief Thunderwater's ashes are interred next to him as well. People have been saying since about the 90s is about the time the story emerged, saying that Erie Street Cemetery is haunted by Jacosat. What people don't realize, though, is that from about 1861 until 1863, Erie Street Cemetery and the area around it was haunted by a colossal phantom known as the Erie Street Ghost. And that's another story that'll be in this, and that's another one that has been long forgotten.
Yeah.
This massive, they said it stood between 10 and 25 feet tall. They said they could probably elongate its proportions as it desired. Dressed in white, wore a white cap, and was tall enough it could take off its cap and place it on a second-story windowsill. It may even have killed a girl, scared her to death.
Really?
Yeah. So.
And where do these stories come from? Like where?
Well, I'm finding them in newspaper. That was all the rage in the newspaper. It went on
right?
for 2 years. Yeah, I found almost okay. So. One of my last book, my last book was Lost Put-in Bay. There are no ghost stories in Lost Put-in Bay.
Yeah.
It's just history, and in some
that
cases,
was
it's
going to be one of my questions.
Yeah,
do you do anything other than haunted stuff? But
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are no ghost stories in Lost Put-in Bay, and in some cases, it's not just like hotels that burned down and steamships that are no longer there. There's a little bit of lost and found. I did find a couple cemeteries on the island that are in there. I found that one of the first cabins on the island, it's still standing.
Yeah.
It's now the Getaway Inn at Cooper's Woods. It's just been added onto and moved to a different location. I found the location of an old War of 1812 era blockhouse.
Yeah.
It was on Gibraltar Island this whole time. Found enough evidence of it. So I got to represent those stories.
So this is just going down to the public library and looking at some old newspaper articles.
Well, I'm doing a lot of the work from home on my laptop. But yeah, a lot of it is going down to the archives office.
They've probably digitized a lot of that stuff. Probably not everything, maybe, but
a lot of it's digitized. So I do searches, and I've got my research method. But some of it's going through books.
Yeah.
I use a lot of Ancestry.com to find out who the people that are tied into these stories are or were. And what ultimately happened to them. You know, I look into a house. One of the questions I ask is, okay, you got the house. The house is haunted. Okay. Well, is it the house that's haunted, or is it the site? What happened there beforehand? There's one story about I guess really it's Cleveland's first reported haunted house around 1840. One house on an area called the Commons, south of town. Solitary, untenanted brick house that, quote, enjoyed the reputation of being haunted. I looked into the history of the site, and there was a kid that died there. Does that mean that kid haunts the house? I don't know. What was there before then? A grazing pasture just south of a deep gully and ravine, and the bottom of that ravine was littered by the carcasses of cows that have fallen into it and broke their necks. Haunted by cows? I don't know.
The bovine.
I don't give. I never give an explanation as to why a place is haunted. I say, we don't know who haunts a place, or even why, or if it is even really haunted. A lot of times it's people looking to get out of their lease, I think.
What really is? I mean, what really is a haunting?
Exactly. That's the other question. Is it doors opening and slamming? Is it phantom apparitions? Is it putrid smelling clouds of smoke that have a grizzly bear emerging from it? Is it a dead child standing on the stairs? Is it lights that turn on and off? Is it someone running up and down the stairs, a little kid giggling? Is it cold spots? Who knows? Here's a question. Well, what happens when you tear down the haunted house? Is it the site or is it the ghost? Where does the ghost go?
Right.
I won't go into
Isn't
it.
That like poltergeist though?
Well, that's if you build on a cemetery, and I did joke about that. So I had written 3 mystery novels before being signed to History Press, who has been my publisher since. The first book that I had signed with them was Buried Beneath Cleveland. Lost Cemeteries of Cuyahoga County. I found over 50 cemeteries here in Cuyahoga County alone nobody knew about because they've been moved, quotes.
Right.
Now, if you've seen the movie Poltergeist, and they got houses and grocery stores and parking lots and whatnot on top of them, and I always say, if you ever see the movie Poltergeist, you know it's a bad idea to build anything on top of a cemetery. Because, first, innocently enough, the kitchen chairs will move around on their own. But then the tree tries to eat your son and your daughter gets sucked into the closet, and you can only talk to her on channel 43.
And you got a creepy clown.
The clown, I'm just kidding about 43. I actually watch 43 every night. It doesn't suck. Okay? I joke that. 61, on the other hand, which is now like I think that's a Spanish channel. It was a home shopping channel for a long time, but I remember when channel 61 used to be like an actual.
You
might remember that we used to.
No, I remember that. Yeah, 61 was a thing.
You remember the preview channel? At like 8 o'clock, it like went into like scramble mode, and you'd have to, if you wanted to watch it, like you could still watch it, just all the colors are reversed. In our case, all the blacks and whites are reversed because I had a little black and white TV upstairs in my room, and I remember watching like Poltergeist on preview channel, and it was scrambled. So you
and so like I'm just kind of curious, like so like if like in Poltergeist for instance, if they never built a house on there, it wouldn't be haunted. It was just the disrespect of the doing,
Well, if you watch the second movie, you come to find out that it's actually some preacher from the 1800s named Henry Kane and his flock that sealed themselves in a cave beneath. I don't think Steven Spielberg actually wrote that into the story. I think the idea was you built a house on top of, or a whole shitload of houses on top of a graveyard, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's okay. And I love the story. That's my favorite. That's one of my favorite movies. I love Poltergeist. It's a great film. It's
great. It's awesome. So, but
scary shit.
Outside of Poltergeist, though, it's like like the Franklin Castle, for instance, or I don't know, or this other place over on off of I-71.
Leading Road.
Leading Road. Like you said, if you tear down the house, is it still haunted? And would you have to build another house for that to be haunted, or?
Well, where does the ghost go next door, or? I can't say what.
All the other people that aren't haunting things.
They moved on. I don't know. It's one of those great mysteries that we'll never have the answers to. I love rediscovering them though, and
that's cool.
That has been, because I didn't just find 31 chapters for Cuyahoga County. Believe it or not, I got about 40 for Northeast Ohio and about another 30 or 40 for the rest of the state.
Yeah.
That was just way too many to put in a book, so I narrowed it down to Cuyahoga County, and I'll follow it up in a few years with Northeast Ohio probably. But I got some wild zingers that I'm sitting on right now. That I'm just gonna hold off on until that book comes out.
Well, when that book comes out, I'd like to have you come back on here. And,
absolutely.
Talk about it. But this house we're sitting in right now. This house was built in, I believe, 1918, something like that. So, but the whole rest of the neighborhood was built in like the 50s or the 60s.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was just always kind of curious, like, what the hell? Because this is pretty much the highest point of land. Like somebody built a house and they're like, this is the highest point right here.
Mm-hmm.
We're just gonna build this one right here, because really I have no flooding problems or nothing. Everything kind of flows away. You know what I mean? But I was always kind of curious, could I go down to I always wanted to go down to the city and see if there were old photographs of this area. But
there may be. Cuyahoga County Archives has a vast photo collection attached to the property cards. So you could do that. You could try getting The Cleveland Memory Collection is the Cleveland Memory Project, Cleveland
These
Public
are all
Library.
websites and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
well, or you can go down to physically to the Cleveland Public
Right.
Library. They have Board of Zoning Appeals photos. They've got a lot of those. So if there was ever any kind of a variance taken at any point or made for this property, they might have photos of it.
Right.
It's a possibility. The archives, county archives, so you could go down there and look it up directly. But yeah, you have other websites. Cleveland Memory Project has a lot of, and even Cleveland Public Library, you can go online, or Western Reserve Historical Society has a photo archive online.
Yeah.
You can find some pictures.
Yeah.
But there are even maps that you can find
Right.
online, and you can watch the evolution of your neighborhood. You can even see, it goes back to the 1850s.
Yeah.
So you can even see when this was all Bo Johnson's farm, you know.
Right.
There was a barn here at one time.
Well, I do know that, because all of this was Bedford at one point.
Bedford Township, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then this was like the Maple Grove area. You know, that's why down the street you got a bar called the Maple Grove.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah. So
it's nice. I like that.
Yeah, but so I know that much about it, but to me it's just really interesting that, you know, because half of this house is an addition built in like the 60s.
Mm.
And the other half, like just this part we're sitting in basically was built like, you know, and that it's very charming. People walk in the house and they're like, "Oh, this is so cute," and it's charming. Like everything's like not right.
Oh, it's a cool house. Yeah, I like this house. I think your dining room is awesome. Yeah,
right. Yeah,
it's got a good flow to it. It's I like it.
Well, see, the dining room's the new addition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so everything on that side of the house is new.
Huh.
So at one point, I'm just imagining this, and back in like 18, probably for like 30 years at least, it was the only house sitting here. And what did that look like? You know what I mean? Why?
Probably
Why
look like
was
when
it
you're
here,
driving
you
through
know?
the country and you got a house kind of by itself, you know,
Yeah,
surrounded by
right.
farm fields or woods or something.
Right.
That's probably what it was.
Yeah, but
Somebody
it's
bought
like,
it, cleared it.
who was the person that decided to?
We could probably find that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that hard to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, go start tracing titles even. And
A guy like you, it's not hard to find. Well, you know, yeah, I you know, going through school, I definitely realized all these archives you can look through.
Yeah.
It's like kind of opens up, and that's actually what I wanted to ask you was, how did you learn how to do this research?
a lot of it was self-taught, but some of it, my mom showed me the things like census records, things like that. I kind of had I had to teach myself how to do searches on title transfers through the county records,
Right.
county recorder's website.
I took
Now
like
they
a
changed-
surveying
yeah,
class, and
yeah.
that just taking that class
really
opened my eyes, because they really go into it.
Because you got to figure out, you got to learn what a rod is, what a chain is, what a link
the
is.
measurements,
It's which now you got online conversion tables that you can. So like when it says because I'm reading, because it gives you read the really old ones, it'll give like especially if it's like a farm of a substantial size or something like that.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, cemeteries, and we just found one in the last year.
Yeah.
Right in Cleveland here that is unfortunately about to be developed on.
Okay.
And I was approached by the Historical Society of Brooklyn Center, Old Brooklyn over there, or Historical Society of Old Brooklyn. And Connie reached out to me and said, well, we think that there might have been a cemetery here. Would it be possible to find? I said, yeah, let me look into it. And within a day or two, I had an answer. And the answer was yes, this was a cemetery. I found title transfers from when it was moved to what's now Brookmere.
Okay.
And
so they moved the cemetery?
They moved the cemetery.
So they exhumed all the...
They not all. They exhumed what they could find and those that were willing to be moved, because what they built on the site was a church.
Okay.
And it's always to be used as a church according to the title transfer. or for religious, or in this case, I guess, technically, burial purposes.
Yeah.
And there is one piece of land between the church and the building that now houses the Historical Society, which was on the verge of it,
Yeah.
that has never been built upon, which means that there was no, when they built the church, if they found a coffin, they moved it over to Brookmere.
Yeah.
But they never developed this site next to it, immediately to the south. It's still a grassy lawn, which means there are probably still people buried there.
Yeah.
And they're about to build like a multi-unit high-rise apartment on the site, or condos or something like that. And I'm like, well, yeah, and they're now aware that it is a cemetery, and when you buy a property, you can pretty much do whatever you want with it, I guess, because it's not registered as a cemetery, but it was the old Brighton burying ground.
So,
that's what it originally was.
So what if, like, an archaeologist wanted to come in? What would they have to do to get the? I mean, could they stop it? There's nothing.
No,
they can do?
they would. No, there's really nothing they can do.
No.
If it's. I digress. That's I stand corrected. If it's Native American.
Oh well, I
you're
know
damn
that.
right. We're stopping immediately.
Right,
yeah, that's
you're not allowed for sure.
Well, you are, but you're. If it's surprising and you find and you're like, oh, hold on, we're hitting human remains,
right?
And then they stop, because the first thing you do is you call the police, because it might actually be a crime scene.
Right.
But then you look and see, well, are they in a casket? If they are, they're probably settlers. Are they with Native American artifacts? And if they are, well, then they're probably Native American. But you're still going to have the bones examined. And
So
at
you
that point,
talk about this stuff like it happens all the time.
well, it has happened up at various places. Okay, when they find Native American remains, they'll Native Americans will come in and they'll rebury them on tribal lands.
Right.
Okay.
I took like an Ohio archaeology class.
So meanwhile, though, up at Put-in-Bay a few years ago, now I worked 8 seasons as a park ranger.
Just because I know
Bay,
doesn't mean.
So when I was working at Put-in-Bay, somebody was building, I believe, a deck or something onto their house, and they hit human bones.
Right.
Stopped work immediately, called in the police. And they said, okay, these are very old. And it was 3 sets of human remains, and they sent them over to the county coroners, he's not a coroner anymore. He's actually now he's my doctor.
Wait.
Yeah.
The coroner is your doctor?
Yeah, he's my doctor. Yeah. Good. So, well, hey, if I go on the table, he can just say, yeah, well, I know what he died from. Yeah, Dan. Yeah. So. He examined them as he said, these are very old bones. So they were determined to be pioneer bones. We don't know how they died, but they were buried together in one grave, probably illness, or they were probably found.
You think about how many people walked across this land.
Put-in-Bay, though, was very remote, and this is after the War of 1812, and yet it was prior to De Rivera purchasing it in 1854 and building up the village of Put-in-Bay. Now, we do have the names of some people. We do know where the original cemetery on the island was. We think these might have been, or they might even have been older, and they might have been French Canadian fur trappers, or a family of them that were on the island and they died. Somebody found them, or somebody, maybe a shipwreck that went down and bodies washed up and they buried them together in one grave. We don't know, but what we do know is this. Those remains, after we realized that they were not Native American, they were European American. They were reburied on the island at the island cemetery, the newer one, and they were put together in one casket. And somebody donated the casket. Somebody donated the money to get a headstone for them. We don't know who they were. I went on my lunch break because, I was a park ranger. I worked for the National Park Service, so I was still in my uniform, and I wanted to go attend the funeral.
You did a lot of cool shit.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that was the coolest job I ever had. It gets better. I'll get into all that later. I went down on my lunch break to go attend the funeral, which was starting at the Episcopal Church and going over to the cemetery for the burial. And they asked me if I would, and I'm in my uniform, they asked me if I would be one of the pallbearers. Yeah, so it was myself, the chief of police, EMS, fire department. So we were all in our uniform. So and I was
Yeah.
park service, and I happened to be there, so we were the pallbearers for these people who came to the island and never left and will be there forever. We don't know who
Right.
they are, but it was a really touching ceremony though, and being a part, carrying them to their final resting place. So in that case, yeah, they were reburied there, and the deck was built. That was, but it wasn't a actual cemetery.
No DNA kind of thing.
No, I don't think they were going to get into that at that point. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just a few years ago, but meanwhile, some
do they
years
kn-
earlier, they found another human body on the island, and they're like looking at it, and apparently it had a bullet hole in the head.
Yeah.
And then they checked, and they found some sort of identification. This is a guy who went missing during Prohibition from Detroit.
Wow.
So those remains have been on the island at that point for well over 50 some years.
What is
and
that story?
Yeah,
Guy got on a boat trying to get away.
Somebody was taken to the island, and they were disappeared on the island and
Yeah.
left in the
Oh,
woods.
right.
They're buried in
Yeah,
a shallow
yeah.
grave. So somebody found them.
Yeah.
Found them later, and then so they were able to identify that person. I
Like
guess.
a gangster kind of
Yes,
thing. Yeah.
like a
Okay.
gangster kind of thing, I guess.
So gangsters have boats.
Oh yeah, that was during Prohibition, especially up there in that area. That was a hotbed. People were they
Yeah.
were using race boats to get the booze over. Kelly's. It was called coming in from Canada, jumping over from Peely Island. They were using little islands like Middle Island, which was uninhabited, as a stash. Gibraltar Island in the bay has a little tiny cave on a little hidey hole where they were stashing booze, and people checking in all the time. It's empty. There's no booze in there.
So, and they would do that because the police probably don't want to go all the way out to this island, right? Or where
so they
was there a
drop it
police force
off
on the island?
Middle Island sits in Canada, so they would drop it off there.
Yeah.
And then American boats would go over and pick it up, and then they would have to like dodge the harbor police coming into Sandusky, or they're out on the lake and they're watching, and they're like, oh, you're bringing in booze, okay, you're under arrest, for rum running, that's what they were doing. They were rum runners. So
yeah, I remember going there in the
bootlegging.
flats in the late '90s.
Rum runners, the bar, yeah.
Right.
Rum runners. I'm like, I drink those up at Put in Bay every now and again. They're delicious.
Actually, I think there's a new rum runners down there now.
That would be awesome.
No, yeah, I think it's Thirsty Dog, if I remember correctly. I haven't been downtown in a little bit, but
These are interesting.
what do you got?
Coasters.
Oh yeah, I work for an airline, and at one point, a friend of mine wanted to go take a trip to Greece, and she needed her shift covered.
Oh, okay.
So she came back and gave me those coasters. And anybody that hasn't been to my house and seen these coasters, they're Greek coasters, And the Greek people, I guess, were very liberal with their sexuality.
Yes, they were, apparently. Well, they're nude.
I remember I didn't open the pack yet, and it was like, I don't know, like a girl blowing some dude or something.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, yeah, it's kind of turning me on. She's like, hopefully not all of them. So I open it up, and it's like, it's all walks of life going on.
Yeah, I
there,
think this one's getting handy, this one's got 3 people in it. That's cool. And she's giving that dude Bobo. Yeah, it's
yeah, and then there's like
It's
there's
rockin'
definitely
dude.
men on men, and there's all kinds.
There we go.
Hey, they were
very liberal in there. Yeah, it's all good. Oh, Greek. My great grandfather was from Greece.
Oh, nice.
Yay.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. I went to Greece for a day, like just one day overnight, and I ate at probably 5 places in that one day. And, man, some of the best food I've ever had.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, I just had a tomato the one time. They're like, yeah, here, have this. I'm like, what? And it was a bad, dude. I grow my own tomatoes, and they're damn good. But it wasn't as good as that. I don't know what they're doing over there. I mean, that's the real deal over there. But
never
so
been.
so are you just like Ohio local northeastern history, or do you
Right
kinda
now.
get into all kinds of other stuff? Or
Right now, I'm Northern Ohio history.
Yeah.
I'd like to. I'm finding that what I do can be very easily applied to other places.
Sure.
It's just a matter of doing the research and like and then presenting it. Like for me to do the research, because I know what I'm doing. I can go when I wrote Buried Beneath Cleveland,
Yeah.
the cemetery book. And I talked to Crystal Slavichak, who was my editor at the time. She was my first acquisitions editor. Now it's John Rodrigue. And she said, this is we've never published a book. Says we've done cemetery books, but we've never done a book on lost cemeteries. So this is it's just the editors they loved it, and here it is, and it's been out for 8 years, and the book is still doing really well. It's still a big seller. So this would be great if we could start a make a series of this and start have this as one of our new book series, maybe like Lost Cemeteries of Detroit, Lost Cemeteries of Pittsburgh.
Well,
I was more than happy to show other authors how to do this if they wanted to start a series on it, but it didn't. I don't think anybody really picked up on it. And I was talking to a fellow I know the other day, and he was asking me about it. I said, yeah, actually, I do have a follow-up in the works right now, Lost Cemeteries of Northeast Ohio. I already have it. It's already written. It's just a matter of... And I got the photos. It's a matter of just throwing it to my publisher and saying, okay, here we go. We're all ready. And there it goes. So,
okay. So I'm curious then, because like right down here over by Tinker's Creek, there's, you go up the hill.
That is called, Terra Vista, also called Tinker's Creek Cemetery, also called Pilgura Cemetery. That one, quite a few people know about it. It's up an old road. At the Terra Vista Research Area. It's all part of the National Park Service down there. It's part of Cuyahoga Valley.
Stones. I mean, we used to go when we were kids. We would go down there.
There was a fellow who was one of the first people buried there. Died on his way home. He was in the Army during the War of 1812, so I think he was probably coming from like Fort Meigs or Fort Stevenson or something like that. And he was on his way back east, and he died there. Took ill and he died, and that's where they buried him.
Because
Comstock, I want to say his name was. I might be wrong.
I think I remember seeing that name there. Yeah.
So he's a veteran of the War of 1812. What a lot of people don't know though is go a little farther.
Yeah.
Because it's on it's on you're on Tinker's Creek Road. You pull over by the Red Barn there where they have the theater, and they just did a reading of the Declaration of Independence. They do the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Check that theater group out. It's great. Keep going down Tinker's Creek. Go past the tavern.
Yeah.
Another great place until you come up to Dunham Road. It's hang a right on Dunham.
Mm-hmm.
And start heading up. You're going to pass almost immediately on your right something that used to be called Astorhurst.
Correct. The golf course.
The golf course.
Yeah.
Right after that, on your right-hand side, there's a little pull-off, and you see a gas well type structure sort of thing sitting there. A bunch of pipes coming out of the ground and meters. Pull in there and park your car there. Get out. Walk back across Dunham Road going east. Now you're walking east, okay?
Right.
Right about where the road and the hillside to the east kind of come together, and it's flats. Walk into the woods going east and walk till you find a hill. Yeah. Now the terrain is hard.
But is that the trestle?
No. We're not taking you to a trestle.
Okay.
This is south of where the trestle was.
Okay.
South and west of the trestle.
Okay.
This is you're going to walk into the woods. You're going to see a hill ahead of you. Walk to the top of that hill, and on top of that hill, you're going to find 6 sandstone posts sticking out of the ground.
Really?
And in the middle of them is the headstone for Edmund Gleason. It's the loneliest headstone in Cuyahoga County.
Yeah?
Edmund Gleason is still buried there. His family that were buried up there were moved to the Bedford Cemetery. And there's a large boulder marking them. And you'll see an Edmund Gleason name on that one. That's not our Edmund. That's his nephew. Edmund Gleason died, I want to say it was 1854, just a few months after finishing building his house.
Yeah.
It's the house that sits at the northeast corner of Tinkers Creek and Canal Road. That stone house that's on that little hill right there before you come to that cemetery that you guys go to. That stone house that's there, that was his house.
Really?
He finished building it and he died just a few months later.
No kidding.
Where he's buried, that property was where his father, Moses, had built a house. It's called the Gleason Homestead, but it would serve as something called the World's End Tavern. And it burned down in 1940 or 1941. It burned down, and it was still in the family at that time.
Yeah.
Now, the Gleason family had built an identical house right about the same time, and that's still standing, and that's the Canal Exploration Center.
Okay.
The one that's got the working canal lock, and it's got the statue of the mule and all that. That's also by the Gleason family.
Okay.
It's identical to the World's End Tavern. Wow. They looked identical. They were exactly the same house. So if you want to see what the World's End Tavern looked like, go check out the Canal Exploration Center in Cuyahoga Valley National Park. And you'll get an idea of what that was as well. Yeah. Only that one was on the canal. But Edmund Gleason is still buried behind where his parents' house was. Now, the terrain to get to it, it's pretty rough. And it's buried beneath Cleveland, so look up Gleason Homestead Cemetery. And to make things easier for everybody, I gave you not just directions on how to get there, but I also gave you all GPS coordinates.
Yeah.
So you punch those into your phone, and you can start walking.
That's cool.
Park where I just told you to park, and you're in for a treat. Watch out. There are prickers back there. There are wild animals back there. So I would say don't go in November during rutting season. You got a good chance of running into a buck. Because there are a lot of deer tracks that go through there, so you can see where they walk. I would say go probably in February or March when there isn't a lot of greenery yet and it's easier to get through. Also, there aren't hornets in February or March.
Yeah.
And I've had a few close encounters with hornets. Also, there aren't ticks in February or March, so not typically, but the Marches we've been having, you might find them. So just always dress appropriately. Wear a hat, wear jeans, wear...
Well, so you actually
I've been to every place that I've been to every single place that I have written on.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see firsthand. Yeah. Now, a lot of these places, of course, are in the new book are gone. But I want to see what they're like. Before I did Lost Put Bay, I did Ghosts and Legends of Northern Ohio. And there was still one place that I had needed to visit, and it was a site of something called Mary Jane's Grave, and this is down by Ashland. So I'm like, okay, it's a bit of a drive, but how the hell with it? Okay, so my friend and I, we jumped in the car, and I wanted to kind of go check it out. Now this is in the chapter on quote-unquote witches' graves, okay? It's a bit of an urban legend down there, so we're driving and kind of pull onto this road that goes down to the cemetery. And it's this hilly road. It's a dirt road, and it's got banks on both sides and these wicked-looking trees. And I'm like, these are dark woods. I'm like, I could see why people think this place is haunted. I'm like, this shit's scaring the shit. This is like, holy hell. And then we're driving along, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, well, it says shit, hit the brake. And we slam on the brakes real quick because the road suddenly ends, and there's a dead end right next to the cemetery. And if we didn't slam on the brakes, we'd have gone down a 75, 80-foot embankment into the woods. The road just ends at the cemetery. There are no houses on the road. It's very isolated. It's been heavily vandalized, mostly because of this legend.
Movie, like Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah. It's like holy hell. And we went
Evil
out
Dead or whatever. Yeah,
we and yet no cabins, but just this graveyard where this. Mary Jane's grave was located. Now, Mary Jane's grave is gone. Her stone is gone. That's unfortunate because almost always when a gravestone gets marked as a witch's grave, that headstone's days are usually numbered.
Right.
Because
somebody wants to get it.
It draws vandals. People steal it. People break it. Weirdos come in. There's the cemetery where the storied West Branch witch was laid to rest. Clemenza Elliott. People destroyed her headstone, and then after that, they destroyed the headstones of all of her family members.
Wow.
All that's left is the old stone wall that surrounds the little burial plot and the bases of two headstones where stones used to be. Bowman Cemetery out in Columbiana County. People melted candles all over the headstones. They're like baby dolls with no heads. Just weird witch fanatics. Like,
well, I've been to.
Those people.
Well, I've been to Paris, and I went to that cemetery where Jim Morrison.
Yeah.
Have you? I don't know.
No. I've never been to France.
Okay, but yeah. So I go there. You walk. This is a great story. I walk in, the street noises, whatever. As soon as you walk into that cemetery, the only thing you hear is like crows cawing. It's like you walk into a Scooby-Doo movie.
That's awesome.
But no, and it's like so creepy. Like just everything's built over each other and just mausoleums on just rows and rows stacked up, and and then you come to Jim Morrison's grave, and it's just so littered with everything. It's kind of
people have painted the daylights out of it.
Yeah.
There's joints and
right.
I've heard
all kinds of
alcohol and people like put absinthe down and
right.
I've seen pictures of it and Bowman Cemetery has been so vandalized. Its headstones most of them are knocked over. It's just a legend. It's all, and it attracts these people. I mean, I'm surprised that the Stotskopf ball over at Myrtle Hill Cemetery near Medina that's still standing, and there's nobody buried under it. It's a monument. It's not a headstone. It's just a monument, and it's a granite ball. I think the reason it's still there is because it's just too damn heavy to move. And also the place is watched regularly by police officers, which is great. They're keeping an eye on it. But there's no witch buried there. I went into the whole thing about there were a few witch trials in Ohio. Okay, first off, there's nothing illegal about being a witch in Ohio. There never has been.
No,
never. No, that's not in the.
That's only in Salem, I guess.
Yeah, Salem. Well, it's funny you say that because they did have two trials.
Salem. Yeah.
We do have. Guess what happened?
Two of them. Yeah.
Oh, we have a West Salem also. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Guess what? Salem, Ohio. There was a trial.
Oh, was it?
Involving witchcraft. Only it's not what you think. No, it was a guy who had married into a family, and then his wife passed away, and then he married his wife's niece.
Okay.
And then his mother-in-law passed away not long after his first wife, who was also his second wife's grandmother. Right. And it was at that point that his first wife's siblings started putting it around that he was a wizard and that he had the breath of death and the evil eye, and he had killed his wife. And then he breathed on his mother-in-law, and that killed her. And they were putting this around the parish, that he had the evil eye and the stare affair and all these things they were putting. So the heads of the church got together and said, well, we can't have this. So there was a witch trial in Salem, Ohio.
Wow.
The accusers were put on trial.
Really?
Yeah, for bearing false witnesses against their neighbor, for slandering their family member, their brother-in-law.
Well, that's a crazy turn of events.
Yeah.
It's like a Twilight Zone episode.
And they said, well, if we don't show up at this hearing, well, they can't find us guilty, so none of them showed up. Well, they were found guilty, and they were excommunicated. They were thrown out of the church. Can't do that. We weren't there. They're like, you can't do that. You can't throw us out. We weren't there. They're like, no, you weren't sick, so you could have attended. You just chose not to. So you're no longer welcome in our parish because you will. Because they said you can take back your statements and apologize to your family member, and they refused to do so. And then the following year, somebody else, another family member, put it about the same crap about the guy, and now he's buried over there. So while you're going there, he's not a witch, but he was somebody that was once accused of being a wizard. Yeah. And he's buried in, of all places, where it happened, Salem, Ohio.
Wow.
There was another one that happened closer to Cincinnati also, and that was about 200 some years ago, and that was early. And a woman was weighed on a scale against a Bible. Of course, she was heavier than the Bible, so they
Right.
let her go. And then she moved to Brown County next door because she felt bad for her idiotic neighbors and
Right. Yeah.
didn't want to live around them. But there was one person killed for witchcraft in Ohio. Do you know that?
I did not know that.
Leather Lips.
Mother lips.
Leather Lips.
Leather lips. Okay, that's a good
Leather
one.
Lips was executed in either 1810 or 1812, somewhere around there. He was one of the signers of the Treaty of Greenville in the early 1890s. And in that treaty, he vowed that he would not take up arms against the United States. And that's what earned him the name Leather Lips, is that he was always true to his word. Now, this is as we're coming into now the War of 1812, and he was a chief of the Turtle Clan. And Tecumseh and his brother, the prophet, they were trying to get him to join up with them
Okay.
and ultimately take up arms against the United States. And he refused to do so. But the people that Tecumseh had sent down to sway him and convince him to join up with them, on their way back, they made it to about Huron, Ohio.
Right.
And a lot of them got sick and died.
Oh.
So the survivors continued on, and when they got back, they told Tecumseh what had happened. He said,
Tecumseh is like
he was the one of the greatest Native American leaders of the early 19th century. He was killed in battle. He was killed at the during the War of 1812 at the Battle of the Thames in Canada, also called the Battle of Moraviantown.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he had taken a lot of tribes, a lot of Native Americans, and sided with the British and fought with the British against the United States in the War of 1812.
Yeah.
Now, not all Native Americans fought with the British. Some fought with us also. We even had one, Charles Pohig, a Narragansett Native American, who was actually killed in the Battle of Lake Erie. He served on Perry's flagship, the Lawrence. So he was 18 years old. So we did lose a Native American at the Battle of Lake Erie also. But when these people reached Tecumseh and they told him what had happened, he said, well, obviously Leather Lips is a wizard and he put a curse, a hex on you. Go back and execute him. And they did.
Wow.
And he was, they don't know exactly where, but they said somewhere around Dublin or Olentangy
really?
Cavern, somewhere around there.
All the way down there.
Yeah, and that's where he was executed, was down there. And there is a monument to Leather Lips down there.
Okay.
But they don't know exactly where his burial site is. But there was one of the settlers was a witness at his execution.
Okay.
And he surrendered, and although he denied that he had done it, they let him put on his best clothes, and he did a prayer, and then they executed him with a tomahawk to the back of the head. Yeah, it was pretty brutal. So he was executed not by the state of Ohio. And I looked into witch laws in Ohio because I'm like, well, it's we're not like Massachusetts or anything.
Right.
We were established in 1803. I was curious to see what laws are on the books, though.
It's probably some crazy ones.
Well, there are some crazy, like it's illegal to walk your cow down Lake Road in Bay Village.
Oh, damn it.
It's illegal to walk. I don't remember what town, but it's illegal to walk into town with an erection on Sunday. It's just weird shit like that. No,
Man, that sucks for all the 12-year-olds.
Yeah, I know. God, those poor kids, man. Those guys are just screwed to begin with.
Walking with books in front of them.
Yeah. Fluffing out the front of there. Just walk with your hands in your pockets, kid. Just make it look like you're puffing it out. But and I did find that it is illegal to charge someone money to communicate with the dead.
Mm.
That is an old law, an original law. It's one of the older laws in Ohio. Because according to the state of Ohio, it is impossible to communicate with the dead. Mm. And if you're charging somebody money to communicate with the dead, then you're obviously a charlatan and a huckster, and you are committing a crime.
Right.
And there is somebody, and I won't go into the name of, but it's somebody who's. And there are people that charge money to cross over and communicate with
Right.
dead people in your house. And sometimes
so
they can
you're
apparently do it over the phone, apparently. And they could tell who's haunting just by talking to you on the phone.
Yeah.
And they will try and cross them over for a fee. Guess what? That's illegal in the state of Ohio.
Right. That's probably nothing they'll ever.
No, I
enforce,
doubt they will. But yeah,
it's
that's
like the whole like states with like laws against anal sex. I mean, do they really
Oh, we're a God-fearing
enforce
people,
that?
only missionary, and well, it is illegal in West Virginia to ride in the back of a truck with female sheep. What really bothers me is they actually had to make that a law.
Right.
Damn it, Cletus, what'd you do to these sheep? We can't have this. Somebody should make laws against this. I'm like, oh dear God.
But I think back in that day, I want to say like there weren't there people paying people like Houdini. Wasn't he like big into like trying to talk to the dead or
Houdini,
like and
yes.
there was like a lot of stuff going on back and around that time that like
into the whole mysticism, spiritualism. Houdini was, he would hold seances with he knew like Arthur Conan Doyle and
Right.
who was really into
yeah
this and was like we had a seance and I would get to talk to this person and I talked to that person. It was great
Yeah.
and they conjured this and I've got stories like that are going to be on my tour when I start up like there's one story over in Ohio City where somebody conjured up a ghost that came out of a cabinet in the room, full sheet and everything, and it spoke with a brogue, and they all sang hymns with it, and then it retreated into the cabinet and it vanished. So, but no, Houdini would oftentimes want to talk to his mother who had passed. And so these spiritualists would come in, these mediums, and they would have seances, and his mother would come through and speak through them. And Harry, it's good to see you. And he was like, hello, Mom. And how are you, Harry? It's so dark. And afterwards, he'd say, at the end of it all, he said, then it wasn't published until much later, he said, yeah, it's amazing. My mother is calling me Harry. That's not my name. It's Eric.
Right.
And he's like, that's also amazing, too. She speaks English now. She never spoke a word of English. She spoke Yiddish.
Right.
When Harry Houdini passed away, he told his wife that if it were possible for him to come through, he had something that he would say. And so, of course, he died on Halloween. And so every year after...
I didn't know.
Oh, yeah, he died. Yeah, he died on... if I remember right, he died on Halloween.
Yeah.
Following
the whole popular
punched
thing,
in the gut.
doing the underwater
he actually
thing.
died. Internal bleeding. He didn't have his chest ready for it. His wife would hold seances on Halloween, and that message never came through.
Right.
So.
Yeah, because he said he would.
He said if he could, he would.
Yeah.
And he would find a way, and he never did. So either he wasn't able to, or maybe he didn't want to. I don't know.
He changed his mind.
He did. I still wonder, and I think his wife took whatever that message was. I think she took it to the grave with her. So we have no idea what he had told her he would say. It's one of those great mysteries, kind of like what the hell killed Edgar Allan Poe. Like it's a mystery also. Interestingly, that's the guy that came up with the mystery novel genre. Also, when he wrote Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Oh yeah.
He wrote the first modern day mystery novel. So
Edgar Allan Poe,
he created the genre. And then he dies, leaving us with the greatest mystery of all. It's like, what the hell killed this dude?
Right.
Heard everything from rabies to alcoholism to syphilis, all these theories, consumption.
So gosh. Oh, I think So okay, so here I got two things here.
Mm-hmm.
So you're writing a book. You wrote that book with the gentleman
John Myers.
John Myers.
Castle.
And so we kind of went into like a couple stories on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then And then you were a park ranger, man.
I was a
wanna
park
hear about
ranger.
bro. Where
That
at?
was up at Perry's Victory and International Peace Memorial, or Perry's Monument
Yeah.
at Put-in Bay. Yeah,
Oh,
we
right.
just call it
Yeah,
Perry's
yeah.
Monument. Everybody, yeah, it's a whole really
I've
long
been up
title.
there.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was up there too, and I was the one that was asking people, please take your sunglasses off the ledge.
Yeah.
Please take your purse off the ledge.
Yeah.
Please take your child off the ledge. Please get off the ledge. Don't sit on the ledge. Yeah. So we had a speech we give going up in the elevator,
Yeah.
safety, a little bit of information about the monument, why it was built, how tall it is, a few stats. On the way down, it's a little bit, it's more informal. We don't have to go over any safety rules. So I would say, sorry, you guys have any questions before we get to the bottom? And everyone kind of like looks at you blankly, like, anything about the monument? About the elevator? How old is it? When's the last time it was inspected? You don't care? And they're like, oh.
Nobody cares. Eh?
And I'm like, and then somebody never fails. At least once a day, we always get that one question. So has anybody ever jumped? Shit.
Yeah.
And I say, yes. There was a great suicide pact of 1972 when 12 people jumped at the same time. And they're like, oh my God, you're kidding. And I say, yes, I'm kidding. It's not something that you should be joking about, but no, I said, yeah, there was unfortunately one suicide in 1945. An 18-year-old girl from Hazel Park, Michigan, went to the top of the monument while the group was near the front. She went around to the back and jumped.
Wow.
And she didn't die on impact. She exploded on impact, covering 2,500 square feet of area. The largest piece that they could identify was her finger. And she almost killed 3 people when she did so, who had just walked out the back door. She landed right between them. Had she hit any of them, she would have killed them also. Still ruined their day, because now they're covered head to toe in what the hell was left of her.
Right.
And then we get to the bottom, and the elevator stops because it's only a 1-minute ride down. And the whole elevator is staring at me. All 10 people are like blankly like,
yeah.
And then usually it's a guy that asks, and his wife hits him and says, I told you not to ask. And then I open the door and say, hey, and on that happy note, I'd like to thank you all for visiting your national park. I hope you have a great weekend here at Put-in Bay, and come back and see us again soon. All right, oncoming riders. And I get into the whole Cedar Point
there you
thing, keep your head and arms inside the mixer at all times.
That's cool.
That was a great job. I actually couldn't believe they were paying me to do that. It was the best job I ever had. I woke up. I wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
I was going to enjoy myself. It wasn't work, because I was doing research on the battle, on the people, more specifically on the people that fought it. That was a big project I was working on, finding out. I identified what happened to just about every single officer. This was an assignment.
Yeah.
All of the officers for the American Squadron, I found out what happened to a lot of them, made some big discoveries. Obviously, we didn't have a lot of cameras back in 1812, so I found some portraits. But where I didn't have portraits and I didn't have photos, some of them lived to see photography, some that we have photos of some of them much later on. What I did find was their signatures on their military records when they were given like a promotion. They'd get their paper and they'd sign it. So I had their autographs.
Right.
I'm like, this is great. I could put those in for an image. This is wonderful. Found out what happened to some of them. Some of them, we had no idea what happened to them. I found them. I found out one of the officers killed in the Battle of Lake Erie. I found a whole thing. I found an article written by his father for the newspapers talking about how the nation is celebrating the victory of the day by lighting fires across our country. Meanwhile, his family is donning their mourning cloaks, and he hangs his harp on the drooping willow. I'm like, oh my God. And he goes into this whole thing about his son, John Clark, who was only 18. He got hit in the head with a cannonball, killed instantly.
Yikes. Well, I guess he didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, he went instantly. The other 2 officers killed in the battle have both had destroyers named after them. And then Thomas Claxton, who died a month later of his injuries, another officer, a midshipman, also had a destroyer named after him. Poor John Clark has never had a destroyer named after him. So that's one of the things I want to do, is try and see if I can push Congress to finally, let's give the guy let's give him a boat,
Man, yeah, I got to tell you, with all these stories, I mean, it's, you're a wealth of knowledge, and you could be making all this shit up. I don't know.
No, I'm not. No,
And I can tell. I can tell
I
because
pride myself
I
on the
know
fact that
some
it's
of
true.
this stuff.
That's the best part
I
about
know
it.
some of this stuff, and I'm like, man, this guy's.
Here's the thing. We always think about the Battle of Lake Erie, and if you've been to the mount, and you've been to Put in Bay, you see that blue "Don't
Right.
give up the ship" flag all over the place, and they even have it in the video in the visitor center. In a heroic action, Commodore Perry brings down his flag, "Don't give up the ship," and heroically is rowed from the Lawrence to the approaching Niagara through a hailstorm of musket fire and cannonballs, and gets aboard and raises that flag, "Don't give up the ship" on the Lawrence. He didn't bring the flag with him.
Yeah.
I'm the one that found that out. I found when he brought up his second in command at the battle on charges, that he filed charges.
See, I drank enough Great Lakes to know that I think it's don't give up a sip.
Yeah.
No, but no, I'm sorry.
No, that's Commodore Perry. That's the whole, because we all see these pictures with him. Oh, he's standing in the boat and he's got the flag and all that. No, that's he himself said that flag never came down from the masthead of the Lawrence.
Yeah.
Also, I tracked down, people always say, well, who are the people that rowed him from the Lawrence to the Niagara? Turns out Perry gave the names of 5 men. And I did some research on them. And then in doing that research, I found out that one of those 5 men, his name was Ezekiel Fowler, he did something that so few people who fought at the Battle of Lake Erie did. He wrote down a memorandum on the Battle of Lake Erie about 3 months before he died in 1852. And I found it.
Wow.
It was in the Buffalo History Center at Buffalo, New York.
Really?
It was in there, and they sent me photographs of it. I transcribed it, and because it's written in mid 18th century handwriting, it's very hard to read. It's cursive, but I can read. But the script that they would write in is some words, something. The letters were written differently then. But I transcribed it as best as I could. My friend Don Takachi transcribed some. And this girl, Emma, who worked on the Niagara, also transcribed some of it. And we ultimately got pretty much all of it transcribed. Ezekiel Fowler even says in his account of the battle, when the Commodore reached the Niagara, the Commodore did not have his fighting flag, "Don't give up the ship," or any other flag with him. He didn't bring it.
Yeah.
He even describes what Perry's wearing at that. Dark pants and a dark blue coat, and his tourniquet, his cravat is tucked in his pocket.
That's interesting.
Wipe the sweat from his brow easy, So it's awesome finding that stuff out. That's what I love. But then it pisses people off at the park, specifically one of my supervisors, and I think the superintendent, who don't want me telling people that Perry didn't bring the flag because it contradicts the freaking movie. This urban legend. I'm sorry. George Washington didn't chop down a cherry tree and confess to his father, "Dad, I did it." That didn't happen. It's one of those urban legends.
Right.
And why would we propagate this?
Have an apple fall
on him while he's sitting under an apple tree. It's horseshit. Like, why would we propagate?
But he did make up that story, though.
Yeah.
But it didn't really happen. But that's it's funny. Yeah, these old folk tales.
Yeah, why would we propagate the story about Commodore Perry?
Right.
Bringing a battle flag with him, so I don't know. I pissed off a few people when I found that and started sharing that. And let's put it this way: I don't work for the National Park Service anymore.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So.
Oh really? Is that why?
Well, no, I don't know why, but maybe that's just a coincidence. But somebody kind of didn't want me there, so I'm not working there. And I asked about it, and all I got was, we're going in a different direction, and I got really good applicants on my cert, and it turns out that the person that was hired in my place never showed up for the job. Now they have a shortage of rangers up there. Well, it's like, wow, Rob, I would have been there. So,
it's like that whole Graham Hancock thing. It's like he always argues, I don't know, about how archaeologists don't want to hear what he has to say because it kind of changes everything that they have already worked their lives to try and figure out, and it's like, maybe it's a similar kind of thing with, I don't know how you feel about that whole Graham Hancock thing, whether you even know about it.
I don't actually, but I know of where somebody finds something that's contradictory to something that, somebody might have based their entire thing on, and then it's like, and sometimes it's like, it's like it's eye opening. I had somebody find something that I had done, and they say, "Hey, look, I looked into this a little further, and this is what I found." And I went back and I looked at it, I'm like, son of a gun.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, there we so when I'm asked about it, I say, yeah, I digress.
Yeah.
This was, but then similarly though, during the pandemic, I had somebody try and tell me that the cemetery that I just told you about that was up that little tiny hill,
Yeah.
that it doesn't exist. And they said, oh, you're looking in the wrong place. It's up where the Pilgura cemetery is. That's where he's really buried. And they owned a part of that, and they moved the headstone because they didn't really want him being
Right.
known where he's buried. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like,
Yeah.
well, I'm like, you're looking. I'm like, and I had to send this guy. And he's like, oh yeah, we already submitted it to the Historical Society,
Right.
and they're like all excited about it. I'm like, you're looking. Okay, I see what you're looking at, and you're seeing it's lot this section that you're looking in the wrong township. He's like, what? And I sent back and I sent him. He's like, no, I already seen it. I'm like, no, but read this part. You're looking. It's the wrong township. Right. It's actually in Bedford Township and not Independence Township. You're looking in the wrong township. And then the guy never, because I just shot a hole in his whole thing. And
well, like, and that's at least I remember
it.
being back in school, and we had to work in groups, and we had to figure out all these vacant parcels in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, and we had to figure out, and we all had our different things. Like I was trying to figure out like what we can do as far to mitigate a urban heat island or whatever the hell, and how we can develop this land. And I'm like sitting there thinking, and it was like a legit job for the city of Cleveland. And I'm like, didn't somebody already do this? Like, why are we doing this? You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of similar to what, the information's there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like people like you that have to actually just go out there and like look for it. You know what I mean? And a lot of people just assume somebody's already doing this, but they're not. Right? I mean,
you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's there. It is there. You got to find it. You got to know how to look for it.
Yeah.
Or you got to find somebody that knows how to look for it. Like,
yeah.
This is great. There's a Cleveland Public Library has something called the Cleveland Necrology File. Okay, this is awesome, and it's abstracts of obituaries going back to the 1800s, early 1800s, and you could search by name. That's really how you search. Or, and this is great, and I figured this out. You search by keyword, and by keyword I mean your address.
Yeah,
I can put in your address for your house here.
Yeah.
And I can tell you how many people died and who died in your house. Very helpful when you're doing an investigation into a haunted house.
Right.
Very, very helpful. The information is out there. You just need to know how to look and where to look. When I was writing this Lost Ghost Stories of Cleveland, the new book that comes out, I use a newspaper archive that's online. And I found out also that I can search by keyword there.
Yeah.
You know what keyword I used? Haunted.
Right.
You know how many newspapers from 1800 to 1921, 22 that brought up? How many articles? Yeah, about for Cleveland, and pretty much I keyed every paper in Cuyahoga County. Brought up about 25,000.
Wow. Okay, I wouldn't have guessed that many.
Yeah, you know how many newspaper articles I went through?
25,000?
Just about, yeah. And this is what I ended up with was 31 stories. I have a few others that I found, but I didn't put them in there. But
and that's the thing. Like a lot of people don't want to. They're going to get.
Oh yeah, it took it took me 2 years to go through. So I kept it open for about a year, but then I used when I saw that. No, what I did was I did just use I used variations like is haunted, was haunted, haunted by, and I put no by because or ghosts are, or I used variations on it and went through, and that's so ultimately that leads to a book. So apparently,
Well, I'll tell you what. I want to save some for next time, man.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we're coming up on 2 hours here.
Holy
I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is
Wow.
fine. I'm so okay with that. But I think gotta
Yeah,
save some for next time,
yeah,
man. Because I really want to
yeah.
have you, dude. You seriously. Have totally surprised me with the amount of history that you
know what?
around here,
Next
man.
time, by then I'll have my tour company up and running.
Yeah.
We're gonna launch in the next week or so.
Nice. Well, do you know what the name of that is?
Yeah, Strange and Spooky Cleveland Tours.
Is it a walking tour? Or
right now, yeah, there are during the summer, during the nice weather,
Yeah.
we're gonna offer walking tours. But there are bus tours.
Okay.
And there are other special events that
sweet.
are planned, and some indoor tours.
That's awesome.
That I'm working on also. But right now it's Friday night is going to be a pub crawl style,
Oh, nice.
and then Saturday night is going to be more of a like an all ages tour. But my friend Chris Lozier has been working on the website, and I've been kind of like we've been back and forth for the last. That's one of the things that got me distracted earlier.
Yeah.
Was
Is the website up? Or?
it's up, but it's not ready.
Okay.
So I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. It'll probably in the next few days
Okay.
is what we're shooting for. Probably after the weekend. We got to get the ticketing thing down and
Nice.
the plugins for all that. So once that's ready, yeah, we'll be golden. And I'm just gonna blow up the internet with it because I got like a Facebook and Instagram and the new site and everything. I'm just
That's
gonna
cool.
be. Yep. So sole proprietor and host. So I'll be telling these stories. And the downtown, the one that I'm going to do on Saturday is going to be, you're going to hear both of them. You're going to hear a lot of ghost stories that were lost. So some of them will be out of the book. Some of them will not be in the book.
Yeah.
That are new ones. But I've got other tours that I can't do yet because there are bridges that are closed until that happens.
Wow.
But there are historic pubs that we go into and grab a drink, wine, to relax. And then you get the ghost stories before we move on to the next spot.
That's cool.
Yeah, so.
No, that's cool. And then,
Yeah.
so, all right. So once again, just, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
What, your books, what are the books you have right now?
Well, I got the, the line here. So the three Jack Sullivan mystery novels in order are In the Cold Cradled Ground, Waldemar, and then Steward of the Isle. And then after that, it's Buried Beneath Cleveland, Lost Cemeteries of Cuyahoga County, and Haunted Put-in Bay, Haunted Franklin Castle, Ghosts and Legends of Northern Ohio, Lost Put-in Bay, and then this September we'll see Lost Ghost Stories of Cleveland. And
That's
next June, after the Franklin Castle book, I said I wasn't going to do another co-authorship, but I'm working on a couple of them right now. So one of them is next June. You're also going to see my first book with Arcadia, which is a sister company of History Press. It's one of the Images of America series books, the sepia tone ones you see in all the grocery stores and all that. Cleveland's Riverside Cemetery with Jamie Lynn Owens, who's the administrative assistant over at Riverside. So it's a whole book about Riverside Cemetery.
And you could probably get these all on Amazon.
Yeah, you can get them all on Amazon. You can get them.
I saw them in the grocery store.
You can get them at grocery stores. You can get them at Sam's Club. You can get them at garage sales, dumpsters, secondhand bookstores. Yeah, you can get them all over. Half price books, probably. Yeah, all that stuff. That's,
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, dude,
Panic's dad has Buried Beneath Cleveland. That blew. He's like, because he says his dad's like, I think I have that. Is the guy right? He's like, that's his book. Yeah, he's like, I had that for a while.
That's awesome.
So I said, he's like, my dad has your book. I'm like, that's awesome.
That is really cool, man.
So,
No, but yeah, dude. Gosh, okay. Bill Krejci,
yeah.
Krejci?
So I tell people it's like think of like a crayfish and your chi. You know, it's
Krejci.
Krejci, yeah.
Krejci.
There it is, Krejci.
Okay,
yeah.
I got it. Bill
Does
Krejci.
it? Yeah. The only people that can pronounce it are people that know someone with that last name, or fans of the Boston Bruins because they got David Krejci, the number 46. So that's
okay.
Yeah. So those are the only people. No, I'm not related to him. It's a common name in Czech Republic.
All right. Well, Bill Krejci, dude, thanks so much, dude.
Hey, Vince, thanks for the invite. Yeah, I'm sorry I was late coming, but
it's totally okay, man. I think it worked out for the best.
Yeah.
We got a little sauced up, and I think that works
we got a little buzz on. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks again.
Yeah, cool. Well, dude, we'll definitely see you back, hopefully.
Cheers. Appreciate
All right,
that.
man.
Thanks.
All right. Sub CLE, we're out.